I guess it's true. I haven't heard. All right, so welcome to Dungeon Mashters. My name is Craig. I am the DM of what will be a live stream. We are going to have a running campaign. I do have 4 other guys who are joining me. Unfortunately, 2 of them are sick tonight with various illnesses. So we decided, instead of forcing them to try and push through, that we would do something else instead, something a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the lore, the world that I've created, the world of Udorra, and give a little bit of background and insight into the campaign and what we can expect coming into this. So you guys at least have some sense of what this world is, and it's not completely new, because it is a homebrew world. We're not playing in an existing world. This is something that is something I've created, spent a number of years working on this world, actually. And so you can actually see I've got a map up of the world here. This area is called the region of Dare, and it is pretty much the single populated region in the world of Udorra at this point. Udorra is a world that has gone through multiple cataclysms. The world has been rent asunder time and time again, and that's kind of due to the actual chaotic nature of the world itself. And there's been great empires of the past that have all been ripped apart. The landscape itself has actually changed multiple times, and what is left over in this current era is this region of Dare. And Dare is kind of separated into 2 main areas. There's the mainland, the area around the Sea of Ruin, the Broken Coast. That's sort of the more established region. It's really where a lot of the major empires existed in the past, where some of the older kingdoms exist now. And then you have these islands, a group of islands to the west, the Broken Isles, and they're sort of the frontier of this world. So you've got the traditional kingdoms in the east, kingdoms that have lots of rich history and have established order, things like that. And then to the west, you've got these islands. Think Age of Sails in the Caribbean islands, where you had multiple different factions, different countries. You've got pirates, of course. We can't do a sea campaign without pirates, so yes, there are pirates. Both the bad kind, the evil, kill everybody kind, and the other group of pirates who are basically just free sailors. They don't want to belong to any one specific country. They kind of want to be their own captains. They want to fly their own flag. They don't want to sail for a government. So you have those different factions. You have a lot of people trying to make a name for themselves, trying to make a new life for themselves in the islands. And that's very dangerous, because the islands have less laws in general, or less established laws. There's a lot of war that happens. There's a lot of raiding. There are, of course, monsters and beasts and creatures and all that fun stuff. So this campaign takes place in an area called the Sea of Souls, which, if I zoom in on here, so the Sea of Souls, like it sounds, is known for being haunted, more or less. People see ghosts and apparitions and all kinds of stuff very often sailing through the Sea of Souls. There have been countless shipwrecks caused by storms at sea, pulled underwater by creatures, pulled underwater by shallow reefs, all kinds of different things. But the Sea of Souls is where everything is taking place. And there's the Sea of Souls, some people don't believe that there's anything really supernatural about it. They think it's just kind of fog, and people seeing things in the fog, sailors telling stories about things that they've seen. But those who have actually sailed through the Sea of Souls and made it out, they tell differently. They say that, yeah, there's definitely things that are in the mist. There's things under the water, things that are not natural. There have been many encounters. People have claimed to see ghost ships, things like that. So there's lots of creepy, eerie stuff that's happening. And then, of course, you have the living dangers as well. You've got pirates, you've got dragon turtles, you've got sharks, you've got just storms that can rip a ship apart. So a sea full of dangers, a lot of different things that can go wrong. But people sail it because it's a lucrative avenue for trade. Anybody that kind of wants to get from Easthold, Galadriel, and some of the main ports on Karachi Island, and between the mainland, Farhaven, which is another major trading port, you kind of have to go through the Sea of Souls unless you want to go really kind of go around the long way. And of course, that's even more dangerous because the longer you're out at sea, the more likely something is to go wrong. So that's where things are going to be taking place. The world itself is an old world. So this is the third age of the world. It's gone through multiple cataclysms, and each age has lasted about 4,000 to 5,000 years. And when the world was created, it was created by a being called Rune, who the people that know of him, not too many people even know he exists, but those who are aware of his existence, they call him the All-Father, they call him Rune the Everlasting. He's actually a step above the pantheon of gods. He's something entirely other. And pretty much all that he does is he goes around the multiverse, goes around different planes of existence, and he creates worlds. That's all he does. He creates worlds, and he uses different methods to create worlds. Sometimes he sticks around and is involved in the life of that world, but more often than not, he just kind of creates a world. He'll often create gods. Sometimes he won't. He'll just kind of leave the world to its own defenses and its own natural progression, and then he just goes off and does something else. So Udorra is one of those worlds that Rune created, and he did so by creating these beings called the Pillars, and he used them to create the raw essence of the world, the prime materials, the prime elements of the world. Now these creatures, the Pillars, they were kind of just snapped into being, and they were very limited in what they could do. They couldn't create life. They couldn't create sentient life. All they could do was kind of manifest material. So they created the world, the tectonic plates. They created the oceans, the land masses, the mountains, all that kind of stuff. And when Rune returned and kind of looked upon what they did, he said, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. But then he kind of put them aside and said, your work is finished. And out of himself, he created the gods. And the gods were then charged with actually giving life to the world. They were the ones who created even just the trees, the beasts, all the simple life. They created the races of the world. And essentially, right from the very beginning, then you had this tension between the Pillars and the gods. Sure, there's plate tectonics in this world. Why not? How else do earthquakes happen? But so you have this tension between the Pillars and you have the tension between the gods. And the Pillars, they were jealous. They thought this was their world. They should be the ones that were put in charge of it. But the gods took over that rule. And the Pillars were actually placed under the four corners of the world. And they were charged with holding it up. And that was to be their job until eternity passed. They weren't too happy about that, and they decided to rebel. And after Rune had left, which he does, he said, okay, I've created the gods, you've got life going on this planet here, good luck, have fun, and we'll see you maybe never, who knows. So he bamfed off somewhere, and the gods kind of started doing their thing with the world. Meanwhile, the Pillars, who are now unwatched because Rune had disappeared, they decided they were going to mess with the world, and they wanted to try and actually tear it apart. They thought, well, you know what, if we can't have it, if this can't be our world that we created, then nobody can have it. So they tried to tear apart the very reality that they created. The gods caught wind of this just in time to band their forces together. They put all their energy together, all their divine powers, and they managed to stop the world from tearing apart completely, but they didn't stop all the damage. The Pillars, they managed to tear a hole, a rip in the seam of reality, in the very fabric of nature itself. and that rip, that essence, continues to exist in the world. It's never been fully patched. It has become a part of the reality of the world. And so the gods were able to stabilize it for a little bit after the first cataclysm, but then another 4,000 years passed, and it, that chaos kind of seeped into the world more and more and more until it broke apart again and tore the world apart again. And so the world is kind of doomed to repeat this. Every few thousand years or so, it's doomed to repeat this tearing apart, this reshaping, this chaotic energy just going wild. After the first cataclysm, Rune came back to the world, and he saw what had happened. And he basically, he didn't really do too much other than he kind of chastised the pillars, and he kind of sealed them in their place so that they couldn't interact with the world at all. They hold up the world, and they have no interaction with the world whatsoever. He kind of chastised the gods for letting this happen in the first place, and he sealed off Udorra from the rest of the multiverse. He didn't want this chaos to spread. He knew that this dark energy, this chaotic reality that existed now, if left unchecked, it could spread to who knows where. So he put a divine seal around the world, sealing it off from the multiverse, from any other worlds, any other planets, any other planes of existence, so that it couldn't get out. And then he left for good, and he hasn't been seen since. So people know of him only from ancient stories that they've found, excavated from ancient empires and like. The gods talk about him sometimes, so some of their chosen or their high priests might hear word of Rune, but nobody really follows him. Nobody worships him. He's kind of this figure off in the background behind everything that doesn't really have much to do with the world anymore. The gods themselves, there are a few different tiers of gods. I'm not going to get into all of this stuff because it's just unnecessary, and some of it will come out during the game as well. But it is a world that has elder gods. They're kind of the high pantheon. They're the ones who are in charge of all the major domains, life, justice, light, fertility, death, all that kind of stuff. And then you have minor gods who are in charge of things like art and beauty, exploration, diplomacy, things like that. And then you have lots of other sort of divine creatures or powers, as they're called. And so there are things like ascended beings who aren't quite gods but have a great deal of power. So you've got the demon lords and the princes of the hells will fit into that category. You've got archangels that'll fit in there as well, powerful celestials and fae. There are avatars, so there are physical manifestations of the gods on the world that they've kind of sent to do their bidding, and these avatars are mortal, but they have some immortality in a sense. They can be killed, but they live very, very long lives. They have tremendous power. They've got a little bit of that divine spark from the god that has chosen them as their avatar, and so they are very unique individuals. You've got kind of chosen champions and heroes of the gods that have lots of power as well. You've got creatures like titans and primordials, these ancient creatures that are huge and massive. They existed before sort of the mortal races, and they a lot of them aren't seen anymore. They've either kind of died off or they've gone into hiding. But of course, there's legends and myths about these great titans that roam the world from time to time. And seeing one is kind of more than most people can handle. They don't want to have any interaction with the titans. So in the seas, for example, there is the Titan Leviathan, who is an impossibly long sea serpent. Nobody really knows exactly how big Leviathan is. Goes beyond gargantuan. So you think like ancient red dragon, and this Leviathan is even bigger than that. It's beyond Tarrasque size. So something like that exists in the world, but how many people are going to have an interaction with it? Probably not too many. But they're there. They exist. The civilizations in the world. So this campaign takes place after a failed cataclysm of sorts. And this actually came out of my home campaign that I've been running in this world for a number of years. there was a Dracolich called Zalathar, and along with the god of the undead, he had planned to remake the world in shadow. Kind of your typical evil thing that somebody wants to do. And he'd almost succeeded. He'd almost succeeded in bringing forth a full cataclysm that would have torn the world apart and rebirthed it in sort of this undead shadow world. My old campaign group, the Knights of the Crown, they managed to stop Zalathar and kind of stop his plans from coming to full fruition, but they weren't able to completely stop the cataclysm. So a minor cataclysm took place, which is still a big deal. It still reshaped a lot of the world. And this area called the Broken Isles, where all these islands are now, it was actually part of the continent of Dare before. It was a big landmass, but it got ripped apart. A lot of the ground sank into the ocean. Some stuff that was buried before kind of rose up. So this whole area is brand new, which is why it is a sort of a frontier in more ways than one, because the nations that exist around the Sea of Ruin, there are still some who were alive before this dark cataclysm. It happened roughly 300 years in the past. But you've got some, living elves and dwarves and the like who remember what the world was like before. And so this whole area of islands is completely brand new. It's a frontier. It has lots of things to be discovered. It's got ancient ruins that have been brought up. It's got new areas to be explored and to be settled and civilized. So there's a lot that's going on in these islands, a lot of reasons for people to flock to them, to be drawn to them, whether it be for adventure or for wealth or fame or just the mere thrill of exploration, or to get away from sort of what might be seen as the heavy hand of the largest civilizations. You've got some major kingdoms in the east around the Sea of Ruin. Kingdoms that have gone to war with each other, kingdoms that have big navies, have a lot of power, a lot of influence. And even though most of them are good kingdoms, they can be, what's the word I'm looking for? For some people who see the opportunity to kind of get out from under the thumb of, big rulers, they might want to go and flock to these islands. So, this is a world of great magic. I'd say it's probably a heavy magic world. It'll be a heavy magic campaign. So I know oftentimes you read in the D&D manuals and stuff, they'll talk about kind of not overdoing it with magic items and the like. Udorra is filled with magic, and enchanting is a thing. People can create magic items. There are ancient items, of course, that are much more powerful and are kind of mysterious. But creating magic items is a thing people can do, and the world itself is kind of brimming with magic. This chaos energy that exists in the world actually breaks through in what are called fractures. And so there are lots of these different fractures around the world. Fractures can manifest as all kinds of different things. It might be floating mountaintops that have kind of broken free of gravity and are hovering above the world. There's an area called the Sunken Forest, which is not far off of the Sea of Souls. And that area, for example, is an entire forest that is on the ocean floor, but it's kind of exists in this bubble of air, and it is a forest. It's got wildlife living in it, but it is completely underwater. So that would be considered a fracture. There's some sort of magic going on there that has allowed this place to exist. So the world itself has magic kind of embedded into its reality. People see magic all around them every day. Some people consider magic to be very dangerous, so you do get the occasional, settlements or maybe even a kingdom where, there's very strict rules when it comes to magic. Think like Cormyr and the Forgotten Realms as an example, where, mages need to be registered. They're kind of watched at all times. But for the most part, magic is just a part of life, part of an everyday part of life. and you've got enchanters, you've got people creating all kinds of new magical wonders and creations. Combined with that, though, there are some people who kind of feel because magic is unstable, or some people see it as unstable, there is a boom of technology that's taking place in the world at this point. So you have dwarves, for example, the Gungrim dwarves in the Gungrim Isles. They're coastal dwarves. They're not dwarves who live underground. They're dwarves who actually, they sail around on the ocean. And they are big on technology. So they've created a number of steamworks and things like that. So there's a little bit of steampunk that kind of fits into the world as well. So you've got these elements of Age of Sail meets like high fantasy, high magic, with a little bit of steampunk and kind of technology, techno magic kind of stuff going on there as well. So all these elements fit in different ways and kind of make for a really interesting setting, in my opinion. I mean, obviously I can be biased because that's my world, I created it, but I like to think that it's interesting at least. I've definitely taken ideas that I've seen in different existing settings, like Eberron, for example, where there's a lot of really neat technology, or even magic-infused technology that exists, and I really like that idea. I like that idea of a world where not everybody completely relies on magic. Like, there are people who are innovative and want to come up with other ways of doing things. Creating steam engines, creating devices, creating things that don't rely on magic. So even though magic is common, not everybody uses magic. Not everybody can use magic. So there are those people who say, well, what if we were able to do this, but without magic, with some sort of engine or mechanism? And of course, dwarves are very good at that. That's kind of a stereotype of dwarves. We see dwarves creating all kinds of mechanical devices, and gnomes as well, being tinkerers. That's definitely at play in this world, and how those worlds kind of combine, and how they clash, will be definitely interesting to see as the campaign plays out. And we will see a lot of that because, again, this area, the islands, as a frontier, there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of exploration and new innovation that's taking place that might be frowned upon in some of the more established kingdoms to the east. They'll look at some of this stuff that the dwarves are doing, for example, and say, well, we're not so comfortable with that. But out in the islands, hey, it's fair game. People are interested in seeing what's new and what's different, and they're definitely more game for it. So it's a high fantasy world, a high magic world, but a world with brimming technology and innovation as well. I kind of picture it as being, I've mentioned Age of Sails. So when you think that the ships that exist, I've modified the stats in Ghost of Saltmarsh, and the boats and the ships that they had in there kind of came out of a UA, Unearthed Arcana, entry on ships that they did before. So instead of using ballistas and the like, because of the way this world works, ships definitely have cannons. Cannons are a thing. Cannons, swivel guns, broadside cannons, cannons of various sizes, various types of ammo. That's definitely a thing in this world. So if you think Pirates of the Caribbean, you think that kind of era where, again, you've got all these different ships that were kind of colonizing the Caribbean, and that's sort of the era of the world that we're in. So it is high fantasy, but it's that kind of setting as well, where you've got ships and cannons. You've got firearms, so that exists in the world as well. And you've got the dwarves are creating some really interesting types of firearms, things that kind of defy what people would believe to be possible without magic. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. The inhabitants of the world, that's what I want to talk about for a minute. So you'll find kind of the standard fantasy races, standard D&D races for the most part that exist in this world. A couple of things that are different, and I have my reasons behind this. I've talked to a few people before I did this, and I know some people were like, oh, I don't know about that, but I don't have any half races in this world. So you won't find half orcs, and you won't find half elves. You won't find two different races or two different species kind of creating offspring together. And the reason for that, in the lore of this world, all of the races were created separately. So there wasn't one origin race. I know in some fantasy settings you might have an origin race where elves and men kind of were the same or came out of the same race. Think Tolkien, for example. In this world, they were created separately. So they are very much different species. Well, halflings aren't a half race. They're hobbits. They're half size. So yes, halflings exist. But half races in the sense of two different races combining to create something new. And it's just really from a biology standpoint or a physiology standpoint. You have two completely distinct species that don't come from the same origin, and so there's no way for them to have offspring. It's just not going to work. Their physiology doesn't match. And I thought for a long time before that, before I kind of made that canon in this world, but for me, it just makes sense. I've always found the idea of kind of half orcs and that to be strange, I guess. Because obviously it's a fantasy world, it's a magic world, but you still have to think biologically in a lot of sense. It has to make sense from a biology standpoint to a certain degree. And humans can't produce offspring with anything else. You can't have like a monkey and a pig. As weird and interesting as that would be, having a kid. So I kind of see it the same way in the fantasy setting, that these different species, they are different species. Now that's not to say that you won't find an elf and a human kind of as a couple. But if they want to have kids, they're going to have to adopt or something. They're not going to be able to actually have a physical child. So I know some people might, disagree with me on that, and I'm okay with that. For me, it makes sense, and for my world, it makes sense. There are some new races that I've created that I've added to this world. One are the Pandir, who are red pandas. And so those are actually published. Those are on the DM's Guild. You can actually find that there. And my friend Mike Echo Fox, he did the art for that, and awesome, did a fantastic job. So I've got those. I've got a lot of beast races. There's the bears. There's the Malkin. So the Malkin are my cat race. They're not tabaxi. I kind of view tabaxi as more like, maybe not house cattish, but kind of leaning more towards that style of feline, whereas the Malkin are more like panthers, lions, tigers, like they're big cat, lynxes, bobcats, that kind of thing. So I've created the Malkin instead of the tabaxi. There's an avian race who are essentially owls. They look like anthropomorphic owls, and very specifically, they're not any just kind of bird you want. They are owls, so their faces are very flat. They've got kind of that owl-like beak, very wide eyes. They can turn their head around the same, and just for something a little bit different. Elves, I've got different kinds of elves. There's sea elves in there as well. Again, the dwarves. There's the coastal dwarves. Do they have a bite attack? Yes. The owls, they do have a bite attack. They are predatory, just like owls would be. They're not they're not like sparrows or something like that, where they're like these, oh look, these cute little birds. They're pretty intense. They're a very fearsome race. There's a lot of tension in this world between the animal races, or the beast races, and some of the others. They're the newest on the scene. So there's kind of three groups of races that have come into existence. You've got the original, who are called the Doyen, and that's the humans, the dwarves, the halflings, the elves, the gnomes, those kind of races. Second came the hybrid races. So in the second age of the world, you had new powers coming into existence that were competing with each other, and you had dragons, for example, were trying to kind of take over the world or kind of claim their place. So you had the Dragonborn came to existence in that time period. Tieflings and Aasimar came into existence at that time as well, where you had pacts between mortals and demons or celestial creatures, and the kind of mingling of that. So sort of what I see as hybrid races, where they're not half races. They are, for the most part, humans that have undergone some sort of change. So dragons took the humans and wanted to make them stronger, so they injected their own essence, the dragon essence, into these humans and bred an entirely new species called the Dragonborn, which there are flying Dragonborn and non-dragon flying Dragonborn in this world. And then you've got your Tieflings, your Aasimar, things like that, which are the hybrid races. So they came second, and then third, after the most recent cataclysm, came the animal races, and they were basically created out of nature magic gone wild. So when chaos kind of exploded and rent the world asunder, nature itself kind of went haywire, and out of that came these beast races that were enhanced, were touched by nature magic, and grew to become sentient and grew into something else. So that's where those species came from. So because they're the newest on the scene, especially in the more established kingdoms again to the east, in some kingdoms they are tolerated. You'll see beast folk walking around, but in a lot of places they're still viewed with suspicion. In some places they have no rights at all. They're seen as beasts. There's a very xenophobic empire, for example, that is they're essentially racist against anything that's not human. They'll tolerate elves and dwarves to a certain extent, but anything beyond that, are either enslaved or kind of killed on sight. So because of all this tension in the islands, you'll find a lot of the beast races. There are turtles in this world. One of our guys is playing a turtle creature, or turtle character. So there's a lot of beast races have kind of fled to the islands. They've tried to made their way out to the islands to try and find freedom from a lot of the oppression that they're facing in some of the more established kingdoms. Some of those kingdoms are coming around a little bit quicker than others, but it's still hard going for a lot of them in those lands. So there's actually a haven in the islands where we've got a lot of the beast races kind of have fled their own homes or fled their kingdoms and have gathered together to create this entire nation of all kinds of beast folk, all living together. Humans and those kind of races, they can come there and they can visit them, but they're not allowed to live there. You have to be a beast folk in order to actually live there and be a part of this society. And if you're not, then it's kind of the opposite, right? Where in some kingdoms you've got humans and elves and stuff saying, no, beast races, you can't live here. And then in this place you've got the beast races saying to them, no, you can't live here. So you've got that happening in different areas of the world, which creates for some interesting tension that comes up for sure. Not a few other things that I want to talk about, but I don't want to give away anything or too much either. But I'll talk about the Sea of Souls again. I'll talk about the area here. So the campaign, it's going to feature a lot of ship travel, a lot of exploration. I'm really excited for it, actually. It starts in the city of Easthold, and Easthold is up here. I drew this blue square here just to kind of give an idea of where the campaign starts. It's not necessarily going to stay located in this area, but this is where things start. And Easthold is a free port in the sense that A lot of merchants who aren't as well established as some of sort of the bigger traders, they can find business in Easthold. They can find goods to sell. They can pick up crew there as well. And so the ship that our players are a part of, our characters are a part of, has docked in Easthold, and it frequents Easthold. And the captain of the ship is kind of known for taking in, I don't want to say riffraff, but riffraff, taking on people who, not because of their talent, not because of their skills necessarily, but because they're in need. And he has a heart for kind of looking out for people and seeing, who he can use and who he can maybe help and work with. And so he's willing to take on miscreants and take on people who other ships would not give a second glance to. And so I think I can safely say that our PCs definitely fall into that category. They're not your typical sailors. They're not the people that you would normally find on a crew. But nonetheless, they've been welcomed on board, and they're kind of taken on as mercenaries more than sailors, more than people who are going to be deckhands or rowing or anything like that. Their job is to protect the cargo that the ship will be transporting back and forth. Any relevant legendary heroes? Well, the Knights of the Crown, who so again, my campaign group, my home campaign group, they were playing these characters. They're actually, their story is famous. Their story is well known because they are the ones who defeated Zalthar, the Draco Lich. So some of them are still alive. We had 2 elves in the group. Nope, that's a different campaign. Paley, my wife's character, so she's an elf. She's a wood elf, and she's still alive. The group, they had inherited a very small fledgling kingdom, Kingdom of Wynn, and Wynn, not Win. They inherited the small kingdom, and she has seen this kingdom kind of grow into something a little bit stronger. So she's been alive as an elf. She's been alive for hundreds of years. Retired from adventuring, she now is totally focused on ruling the kingdom and running the kingdom. But she's a well-known figure. People know her name. So the names of the Knights of the Crown are well known, and people aspire to kind of be like them because they are the most recent grand adventuring party. These group of misfits that kind of came together and managed to stop this world-ending event from happening. I didn't give her the kingdom. I gave it to the group to decide who was going to be the ruler, and they decided that on their own. So that's what they wanted. One of them was the general. One of them was the acting ruler. One of them was they all had different titles, like general, marshal. One was like the religious leader. She was a druid, so she kind of became the religious leader. So they all took on kind of different roles in that kingdom, and unfortunately, a couple of them, they actually died in the fight with the Draco Lich, or shortly thereafter, and so only a couple of them survived. But their legends, their tales live on for everybody to know. But yeah, so there's definitely heroes. There's legends out there of people, who've seen things or have done great things, especially in the islands. Of course, you've got all your pirates that are telling tall tales of things that they've seen. Old sailors who, talk about seeing the Leviathan, having encountered it, or surviving a dragon turtle attack, that kind of thing. Some of them are true, some of them are not. But it's a world waiting for heroes. I know that sounds cheesy and cliche, but I'm going to stick with it because D&D. So there. Yeah. Ooh, I just completed an achievement. Who watches the Watchers? That's very ominous. Thanks, Twitch. That's got me creeped out now. Who doesn't love cheesy and cliche? I mean, I guess it can get overdone in some settings, but I love cheesy and cliche. I'm okay with it. So we're going to be using Roll20 for the game. This map that you're seeing here is something that I created using Campaign Cartographer 3. So I'll give a little plug-in for that program if you've never heard of it or never seen it. It is pretty fantabulous, and this style is Mike Schley. If you have any 5th edition D&D books, even going back into 4th edition, I think he did some of the maps there. But he does a lot of artwork. He does a lot of cartography artwork for not only D&D for Wizards of the Coast, but he does for other things as well. I absolutely love his art style. It's amazing. So I've used his art style with some different edits and stuff like that for my world. And I just recently got the settlement pack that he did, and I'm so excited for that because then I get to make city maps in the Schley style. So yes, I'm very excited. But yeah, so I created this in that program. It took a very long time to do. The world has undergone many changes. I mean, in world obviously, but for myself, I first created this world about like 10 years ago, I think now, when I first started my home campaign back with the original group, and it started out as just a sketch on a piece of paper. I had a rough idea of kind of an area that I wanted to create, and at that time it was called the Shattered Sea, and that's what the Sea of Ruin is here. And it really was just sort of this area around the sea. I had a couple of settlements, kind of one major kingdom, and it grew from there. I didn't have any programs at that point. I just kind of drew it on paper with like pencil crayon, that kind of thing. And once I heard about this program, I was like, okay, I have to have this program. And I just experimented with it, and over the years, as they kind of released different art styles and settings for it, and then they came out with Campaign Cartographer 3 Plus, which had all kinds of new features. Then my world has undergone many different renditions until it is what it looks like now, which I'm pretty happy with, if I do say so. I've got another map in here that shows some of the kingdoms, so you can see some of the major kingdoms that exist in this world, and they've all got their own little crests there. So the campaign starts in the country of Valeran, and so you can see the crest for Valeran there. Ronker, which actually shares this island, Karachi Island, that's the Beastkin sanctuary nation. So that's where the Beastkin have kind of created their own kingdom separate from the others, and they say, this is where I want, our people like us can kind of live free of oppression. So some of the major players in this area, Valeran definitely is a major player. Carafol, which is I guess the westernmost nation, they are not outright evil, but they're much more free in what they allow. So slavery is something that exists in this world, definitely as a negative. There are most kingdoms have outlawed it. There are groups who actively fight to free slaves. One such group is called the Red Hand, and they're very prominent in this area. But a lot of the landowners in Carafol actively trade in slaves, and so they trade with Kohar, which is this nation on the Broken Coast here. That's the xenophobic empire. So that's the human empire, which at one point controlled most of the landmass where these islands now exist. They were the big player back in the day. They've been reduced to something significantly smaller than what they were before. But so they are very active in the trade, in the slave trade. And my current home group They actually, most of the characters, they began as slaves, or they were captured in one of the port towns there, and they were sold into slavery and managed to get out. Yes, Flick the Goblin was freed by the Red Hand, and so that's a good example there of how that's going to fit into our storyline. So they're very prominent in this region. A couple other big players. You've got Farhaven, which, although it's a small island, the port of Farhaven is like the major trade port in all the Isles. So if you want to find something, chances are you can probably find it in Farhaven, or find somebody who knows how to get it in Farhaven. Ships coming from the mainland going out to the Isles and back and forth, most of them go through Farhaven at some point, and it's run by a trade guild called the Far Traders Guild. They are the largest merchant guild and trading guild in the world, not just in the islands, but their trading empire dwarfs anything that anybody else has created. They've got trade routes stretching, all the way to the desert in the east, and so some of the older empires there. And they own this island. They run the city, and they kind of control even trade that doesn't necessarily belong to them, through tariffs and things like that, heavy taxes, port taxes. Pretty much every merchant, if they want to stay in business in the Broken Isles, they at some point will do dealings with the Far Traders Guild. And so Farhaven is a big player. The Republic of Sails, they are essentially a nation of pirates. Can't really call them a nation. It's a collection of free ships, collection of captains who kind of sail their own ships in there. They don't want to belong to anybody. They don't represent any kingdom. They represent entirely their own interests, and they've kind of built their own mini empires, mini trade empires. And it's the type of kingdom, the type of pirate kingdom that is neutral. They're not explicitly evil. They're not righteous by any sense. They're very neutral. And they do have some laws. They don't participate in slave trade, for example. So a lot of the captains who are part of the Republic of Sails, they work with the Red Hand to free slaves. Buccaneer Canadians, yes, fantastic. So they're kind of a major player as well. And then of course you've got so the dwarves I mentioned before. They're the Kingdom of Battle-Or. They've got ships that dwarf the ships of anybody else. They've got some of the first attempts at submarines or ships that can go underwater are being created by the dwarves. They've got a major fleet out on the ocean. A lot of captains, a lot of sailors, a lot of experienced deckhands and people at sea come from Battle-Or. They're known for that. And then there's the Sea Elves, which is the nation of Sharnyar. So their island itself is very marshy. It's got a lot of lakes, a lot of wetlands, and they have colonies both above ground and below water as well. And they are amphibious elves, the Sea Elves there. So those are the players in the Broken Isles. Kohar, they've got quite a fleet themselves, and again they're very prominent in the slave trade. And then as you get into the Sea of Ruin, there's some other big name empires in there. Shankara, Elysia, those guys are big heavy hitters. Kormagal is a cool nation. It's actually ruled by an ancient gold dragon who's slumbering and has been asleep for about 300 years, and nobody knows why. So it's a nation that is kind of it's ruled by this dragon who took a bunch of warring city-states, way back in the day, like 1,000 years ago. And he saw these different city-states that lived on this island. They were all warring with each other. They couldn't cooperate, couldn't get along. And so he just imposed his rule. He set himself up and said, I'm your king now. You're going to listen to me, period. And being a good dragon, being very benevolent. He did it for. He was a bit of a tyrant in the way he did it, but he did it because he wanted there to be an established kingdom, established peace, and the kingdom has existed ever since under his rule. But that does lead me into an interesting part of lore that I forgot that I wanted to mention, is that in this world, dragons haven't been seen for hundreds of years. They're thought to all be dead or disappeared, with the exception of the gold dragon in Cormagul, who is slumbering in his lair, and nobody is able to wake him. But other than that, there are no dragons, and nobody knows why. At some point after the attempted cataclysm, the dark cataclysm by the Dracolich, the dragons just disappeared, and nobody really knows why that happened. Dragonborn are still around, other dragon kin, so things that are related to dragons, like dragon turtles, those are all around. So it doesn't seem to be something racial, but the metallics, the chrome dragons, kind of your typical dragon, they are gone. So people do think they'll be back. Definitely, there's a lot of lore around that as well, where some people are expecting the dragons to be back. There are cults that have kind of banded together, trying to even summon dragons back into the world, thinking they can do that. Giving their allegiance to some of the darker dragon gods, the evil dragon gods that exist, in a hope to kind of bring dragons back, and thinking that, if dragons are going to return anyways, and so if they're on the right side, if they're aligned with the dragons even before they come back to the world, then they'll be spared from the wrath that's to come. So that's a big mystery, and if dragons do appear, it's definitely going to be an event that people it'll be met with mixed feelings, I think. So there are people alive who have never seen a dragon, whose parents have never seen a dragon, whose grandparents have never seen a dragon. And then you've got some of the elves, of course, who remember dragons and remember Szallothar, the Dracolich. They remember the tyrants as they are, and they remember the good dragons as well, the metallics. So there's an interesting contrast in the world there, where dragons are one of those things where, some of the kids or some of the younger people, will hear these legends about dragons, and it's kind of like, nah, they don't exist. They're just myth. There's no such thing as dragons. That's something from the past that people made up. So that's kind of an interesting thing in this world. And you might think, well, okay, Dungeons and Dragons, how can it be Dungeons and Dragons if there's no dragons? But I didn't say there won't be any dragons. I just said they currently don't exist in this world, as far as anyone knows. But there's lots of other threats, of course, that can be encountered. So anyway, it is almost 10. Wow, I've been at this for an hour already. I could probably talk endlessly about my world that I created, because I love it so. But if there's any other questions in chat, and there's a couple of you guys that are in chat, so thanks for hanging out. Any lore questions, I can... Dungeons and more dungeons. Yes. We're calling the campaign Ships and No Dragons. No. We can call it Ships in the Sea. I can talk about where Dungeon Mashters came from. We're those of us who are playing the game. We are all Dungeon Masters, connected with the Round Table, the restaurant in Waterloo. We run their D&D games there twice a month. And so I thought it'd be cool to get my fellow DMs together to play a campaign. And we're trying to come up with some different names of kind of a pun on that, because I like puns, in case you haven't noticed. So I wanted something that was kind of punny and connected to us all being Dungeon Masters. And Dungeon Mashters was one that came out. We had a couple different things that came out in our conversation, and Dungeon Mashters was kind of the end result. And it's fun because if you say it like Sean Connery, Dungeon Masters, then it just sounds like you're saying Dungeon Masters. I said two different words there, but you can't tell. But it also kind of gives a hint as to how the campaign's going to go, I think, because we're not really going for serious gameplay. I think we're gonna mash stuff up pretty good. It's gonna be a mash of chaos and shenanigans happening, because serious is great and all, but I like fun. I like campaigns that are just fun to play, and it's gonna be, it's gonna be massive. It's just true. And yeah, Ian made the requirement that if it's called Dungeon Mashters, then I had to say it like Sean Connery. So I've done that, Ian. I hope you're happy. I will continue to say Dungeon Masters. Yes, the sea shall swallow all who oppose our goals. And probably everybody else anyways. I mean, it is the Sea of Souls, so ooh. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Echo, hey, you made it. Cool, yeah. So no stream tonight, unfortunately, because we had a few people that are sick. So I've just been wasting an hour. I mean, spending an hour talking about the lore of the world a little bit. So, oh, thanks, man. How awesome is Flick, and could he actually be more awesome? I don't know. That's. I mean, he's your character, Ian. So, how awesome he is kind of gonna be up to you. I like him so far, though. I think you guys will be excited. So, oh, Goblin, yeah. Thanks. That actually leads me into another piece of lore. So I've never really liked the idea of inherently evil races. So in this world, races like goblins, orcs, drow, for example, they're not inherently evil in that they can't be good. Most of them, except for the drow, so goblins and orcs and the like, yes, most of them are evil, but more that has more to do with their gods, even, and sort of, you know, how they've existed as a race for thousands of years. So most of them are evil, yes, but you will find many goblins, again, especially in the Isles, the Broken Isles, where it is kind of more of a frontier. You'll find goblins who are good, goblins who are just trying to make their way in the world, you know, trying to do something different, kind of escape the rest of their clan, for example. In the Republic of Sales, for example, in the port there, you know, you find ogres and orcs and the like, kind of hobgoblins walking alongside many of the other races, and it's not seen as unusual. It's very common there, and some of them are just neutral. Some of them are just, you know, they just kind of want to make their way in the world again. The drow in this world, the drow are not evil. I don't like that idea of them being like, you have to be evil. So goblins that shank wizards and back alleys, yes. Yeah, so the drow are they can be anything. They can be just like humans in the world, just like any other race. They can be good, they can be bad. I mean, if you can have evil dwarves and you can have evil humans, you can have good drow. And so there are going to be groups of drow, there are going to be individual drow and the like, who are going to be evil, of course. But as a race, as a species, they are not inherently evil. There are a couple evil elven gods. There are good elven gods, and so there are those who follow the path of some evil gods. But drow are common. They exist in the world. They're seen all over the place, and it's no big deal. You know, if somebody sees a drow, they're not like, oh, I don't know about you. They see a drow, and it's just like, oh, there's an elf who happens to have very dark purplish skin. It's no big deal. So that's definitely how I run this world. Orcs are the same. There are definitely some aberrations, you know, like demons, for example, are evil, because they just are. You're not going to find a good demon or a good devil, perchance. They are fiends. That's actually part of their nature. But for the actual mortal races, the races that exist on the material plane, they can be anything. It doesn't matter. So yeah, we have a goblin adventurer, and depending on where he goes, he might get a few odd looks, but in a lot of places it's just going to be, hey, goblin, no biggie. So yeah, that's kind of a piece of lore that is important for the world as well. So no inherent evil. Socioeconomic conditions of goblin camps. Yeah, I mean they are. There's a lot of them. So all the odd looks. Well, it depends. I mean, depends on how sketchy he is. Yeah, since he's pretty sketchy, then yeah, maybe he's gonna get some odd looks. But deep dive into nurture versus nature. Let's not. Let's just leave it at nurture has a lot to do with it, for sure. That's such a stereotypical thing to say of goblins. Does he wear loincloths? No. Oh, well, I mean, I don't think he does. Ian, does he wear loincloths? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's not something you can ask. There's another race that's going to be in here that I'm working on the stats on. Still kind of polishing it up, but the pangolin. If you don't know what a pangolin is, you definitely need to check out pangolin on the internet, because pangolin are awesome, and I decided to create a race for them. And Mike, aka Echo, did some really cool art for them. So thank you, Mike. Did art for my Ursidians, for the bear folk, for the pandeer, and then for the pangolin as well. So I really appreciate that. And he's going to be helping us out with some art for the characters as well. So I'm very excited for that, because I love what he does, and he's a good dude. So thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I don't want to ramble on too much more. There will be more lore that comes out, as far as deities and as far as, kind of other stuff that will be important as it goes on. But I'll save that for the campaign as it comes into play for the characters. When's the stream? Good question. So we're trying to see if we can do kind of a makeup stream before our next official session, just because we had some illnesses and things. Last week we had technical difficulties. This week we have health difficulties. So stupid life getting in the way of D&D. But next Wednesday is hopefully going to be our actual stream. If not before then, we might we'll see if we can do something before then. If not, then next Wednesday will be when we hopefully actually launch our campaign. We'll do session 1 with all of our players hopefully healthy and present and ready to rock and roll. So follow us on Twitter at DungeonMashters. My Twitter is @_PundyMC, and you can find some of the other guys on Twitter there as well. Their links are through the Dungeon Masters. And if you are in the Waterloo area and you haven't already, then you need to come check out the roundtable and come join us for D&D, because we have a lot of fun. It's awesome. We play in the Legacy of Mana setting, which is something exclusive, like the roundtable guys. They've kind of done this, but we have lots of fun, and yeah, it's good times. More D&D, more better, or more gooder. I gotta spell more. Good luck, Masters. Thank you, Mr. Humanities Ninja. Yeah. So unless there's any other pressing questions, then I can bring it to a wrap. Oh, I want to zoom in. I got a ships pack on Roll20, which is really cool. So I'm going to zoom in so I can show this, even though my map's going to go all blurry on this cool ship here. Hooray! So some of what we do will be, actually have grid maps and stuff. Some will be theater of the mind. Sometimes we'll just have the kind of the world map up here. You know, if we're doing travel, I've got ships that we can kind of sail around the ocean, because yay, I like to play with toys. But yeah, there's a really cool ship pack on Roll20 that I picked up, which looks pretty neat. So it's gonna be good times. I am stoked as well. I hope so. I hope it's gonna be an awesome stream. I'm really excited for it as well. It's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and we've been working behind the scenes to try and get this off the ground. And again, we've had some glitches getting it going, but bear with us. Thanks for your patience, and hopefully we'll be streaming some super awesome D&D shenanigans very soon. But on that note, I'm going to sign off for tonight, and yeah, I'll be posting this on the YouTubes, and all of our content will be posted on there as well. And hopefully we will catch you guys for our live stream next Wednesday. All right, so PunDMC, aka Craig, signing off. Have a good night.